Imagine for a moment. A villain with no strength, no reach, no capacity to act. Is he really a villain? Now flip it. Could someone be a hero without power? The world's greatest heroes and its most dangerous villains are almost always men. That's not a coincidence. It's a reflection of capability, of potential for good or for harm. And whether that makes you nervous or proud, it should make you honest. Because masculinity doesn't begin with violence. It begins with power and what you do with it. A man without capability isn't dangerous, but he also isn't dependable. You must be capable before you can be feared or trusted, before you can be called a threat or a protector. That's where masculinity begins, not in harm, but in potential. A harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has that under voluntary control. Dr. Jordan Peterson. Masculinity isn't about being safe. It's about being in control of your strength. And that's where self-improvement comes in. Because if you are capable but undisciplined, you're a danger. If you are strong but unwise, you're unpredictable. Self-improvement is how masculinity becomes honorable. It's not for applause, it's for preparation. It's how you become someone who can carry more so others can carry less. It's how you become someone others can rely on, not just for strength, but for stability. Masculinity, at its best, is quiet service. It doesn't announce itself, it shows up, not to dominate, but to secure the people and principles that matter. And yet, that kind of silent strength, it makes people uneasy, because it's not passive, it can't be predicted, and it definitely can't be controlled. So instead of understanding it, they rename it, they reduce it, they call it toxic. In 2019, the American Psychological Association published its guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men. It described traditional masculinity ideology as a pattern marked by stoicism, competitiveness, dominance, and aggression, and concluded that these traits, taken as a whole, are associated with negative psychological outcomes. Let's unpack that. What the APA is reacting to isn't necessarily the traits themselves. It's the consequences when those traits exist in isolation. Aggression without compassion, dominance without discipline, stoicism without emotional intelligence. But what they miss is that these traits, when integrated with maturity and purpose, are what make a man dependable. Competitiveness drives progress. Stoicism protects others from your chaos. Even aggression, when tempered, can be what defends the weak. So is it really masculinity that's toxic? Or is it the absence of training, direction, and meaning? Strength isn't just physical, it's directional. And masculine strength has a tendency to move forward, to carve paths, build structures, assert order. It doesn't wait to be invited. It acts when it's time. That makes people nervous. Not because masculinity is out of control, but because it's self-directed. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need applause. A man who becomes conscious of the responsibility he bears will never throw away his life. He knows the why for his existence. Viktor Frankl. But what happens when a man loses that why? What happens when he becomes strong? Well, there has no mission, no future, no tribe. Loneliness sets in, not just boredom, but a lack of meaning. In the 1980s, psychologist Bruce Alexander ran the rat park experiment. He found that rats placed in isolation consumed far more morphine than those in enriched social environments. Addiction didn't come from the drug, it came from the disconnection. We're not rats, but we are wired for meaning, for belonging. for a reason to get stronger that isn't just about ourselves. And when that's missing, the same traits that once built civilizations can begin to rot, not because masculinity is toxic, but because isolation is. Boys have fallen behind across the board. They now make up only 40% of college students. They're more likely to drop out, less likely to engage, and increasingly unsure of their place. Richard Reeves, of Boys and Men, 2022. How did we get here? It's easy to look at addiction, apathy, and loneliness as personal failures. But what if they're symptoms of something deeper? Take modern entertainment. Not to vilify it, but to recognize the shift. Games once built for connection, shared screens, co-op challenges, nights with brothers and friends, are now optimized for retention, not relationships. Split screen faded. Online features replaced proximity, not for technical reasons, but for profit. Because isolation sells more copies. That's not a moral crisis, but it's a pattern, and it mirrors something bigger. During COVID, classrooms shut down. Young men were told to learn through Zoom and passive instruction. No competition, no movement, no struggle, just isolation. The damage wasn't just academic, it was psychological. And it's not just school, it's the structure of everything. Modern platforms are optimized for consumption, not curiosity. Men naturally seek tools, places to explore, solve, and compete. They're handed feeds instead, endless scrolling, constant stimulation, no direction. You see it even in workplace culture, in the way initiative is sometimes framed as arrogance, or how disagreement is softened, not sharpened. What's left is a generation of men who feel muted, like their instincts don't belong in the systems around them. That's not because masculinity is broken, it's because the environments that used to forge it are being replaced by ones that dissolve it. A 2021 Yale study found that moral outrage is amplified by social media algorithms, incentivizing public shaming over private understanding. Science Advances, 2021. That means the loudest voices aren't always the wisest, just the most rewarded. And when outrage becomes currency, people shame before they understand. They attack what they don't control. Because in a world where reaction is rewarded, you don't need a villain to suppress masculinity. You just need a crowd that never stops to ask why. Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect. Mark Twain. That's not rebellion for rebellion's sake. That's discernment. The discipline to pause and ask, is this shame earned or just echoed? In 2023, Pew Research found that 61% of men under 30 hesitate to speak openly for fear of backlash or judgment. Because when you stop asking questions, you stop thinking freely. And when that happens, masculinity doesn't disappear. It gets rewritten, filtered down into something more manageable, more docile, more agreeable. A version of masculinity that's always cooperative, but never directional, always present, but never leading. And yet, there's a paradox here. The paradox of tolerance. Philosopher Karl Popper once said, "Unlimited tolerance leads to the disappearance of tolerance itself. If a society is tolerant without limits, the intolerant will eventually destroy it." Now apply that to men. When men are told to tolerate everything, even the things that weaken or dishonor them, they lose the very edge that makes them protectors. They're no longer strong. They're just silent. And if you've ever been called difficult, for drawing a boundary, for refusing to fold, for standing tall in a room that wanted you smaller, you weren't being dangerous. You were being discerning. Because real masculinity doesn't lash out. It observes, it questions, it holds the line, especially when no one else will. And that's exactly what makes it essential. If masculinity isn't toxic, then what is it for? And how do we use it now, in a world that tries to erase it? Masculinity doesn't need to be rebranded. It needs to be remembered, not as brutality, not as chaos, but as containment of power, not absence of it. Because the strongest men you'll ever meet aren't the ones who dominate. They're the ones who could, but choose to protect instead. The best men are not those who have merely conquered fear, but those who have conquered power. Adapted from John Stuart Mill. Being a man isn't about being feared. It's about being formidable, capable of violence, yet choosing virtue, capable of dominance, yet choosing discipline. Because power without restraint isn't masculinity, it's recklessness. But power with restraint? That's leadership. That's fatherhood. That's legacy. You weren't born to be silent, softened, or edited out. You were born to carry more, so others can carry less. Not because the world owes you a crown, but because you were built to forge one. So don't run from your fire. Refine it, shape it, use it, not for control, but for purpose.